Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good evening. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to keep this brief. I'm sure everyone came here to hear about Argo CD instead of my entire life story. This is ArgoCon, not AnjelicaCon. My name is Anjelica Ambrosio. I am a developer advocate at Mirantis. I was a developer and a teacher in the past, but I took on a role that allows me to combine my passions for both education and tech. I mainly create educational content based on Kubernetes and AI. Now let's get to the main course. Using multiple repositories for an Argo CD application sounds like more work, but it's actually not as complicated as you may think. Think of it practically. As your team scales, more developers are committing to the same code base. And if you have multiple teams pushing and pulling, well, you'll have to push and pray. Let's be real here. Who actually enjoys resolving merge conflicts? But that's only the tip of the iceberg. As the enterprises grow and innovate, their technical demands grow with them. Suddenly, it's multiple environments, multiple clusters, multiple teams, all trying to ship fast, all at the same time. Ever heard the term, too many cooks in the kitchen spoil the broth? Everyone's committing to the same place, stepping on each other's toes. As architectures evolve and more clusters and environments are stacked on top, mono repos stop becoming simple and start becoming a bottleneck. It's just as chaotic as it sounds. Lowers builds, tests, and overall a security nightmare. Can you imagine using a mono repo with a larger scale team? It's a Monday morning, you grab your coffee and you sit at your computer. You want to push a minor change, like adding a couple of lines to the source code. You commit, push, and suddenly that minor change is now blocking 3 other teams' pipelines. Whoops. Let's try rollbacks. But in a mono repo, that last deploy could also include changes to the infrastructure code. So if you roll that back, that could mean you either fix your problem or you just undid everyone's hard work. So if you take a look on screen, you might see a familiar scene. So if someone force pushes without pulling, this can cause lost hours of work. I mean, how many of you have had their teammate accidentally overwrite their work? I know, I have. Not fun. So having so many teams working in one repo poses a huge security risk. Once someone gets into one repo, they'll have full control. So let's talk about separation of concerns. Today, I'm going to share a method to make your life easier, a way to make your infrastructure more modular, enabling that flexibility that modern teams crave. By separation application code and infrastructure configuration into different repositories, you create a more efficient, secure, and manageable GitOps workflow with Argo CD, fostering better collaboration and reducing the operational overhead. A simple pattern would look like this. App repos, which where you keep the manifest, your Helm charts, your configs. Infrastructure repos, where you would keep your clusters, networking, shared services. Your operations repos, where you keep the apps, policies, automation. And lastly, security repos, where you'd keep your guardrails, image policies, scans. This gives a clearer separation of responsibilities, faster, more targeted pipelines, and reduces the risk of the oopsie daisies, unintended deployments. All right, so when do you actually need to use a multi-repo architecture in Argo CD? If it's just you with one service, one cluster, simple mono repo, totally fine. But if you have multiple teams, multiple environments and clusters, or regulated or sensitive workloads, then it's time to consider using the multi-repo architecture. There are also telltale signs it's time to make a change, like your pipelines are getting too slow. Everyone's changes are running everyone's tests. Rollbacks feel more risky to make. The boundaries between apps, configs, and infrastructure start to become blurred. If you're spotting these red flags, then it's time to break up with your mono repos and consider the multi-repo structure with Argo CD. Now you're wondering, how do I multi-repo? One strategy is using app of apps, and I'll walk you through. First, you create the parent application. You start by creating a single Argo CD application that acts as your orchestrator, which is the app of apps. Its source points to a Git repository and a specific path inside the repo. That path is your catalog of child applications. It's where all the child application manifests live. Inside that same repo and path, you define one Argo CD application manifest per the child app. And each child app has its own source section, which points to its own Git repository and path. This way, every child app pulls and manages its own Kubernetes resources from a dedicated repo, which results in a clean, scalable setup where the parent app tells Argo CD which apps exist, and each child app is free to manage its own deployment lifecycle from its own repo. Now let's talk about security. So a huge benefit of multi-repo structure is granular security. Unlike mono repos, it's possible to grant specific permissions according to the specific scope. If one repository is compromised, then the attacker doesn't have access to all the resources and sensitive information of the application. With separate repositories, the Git history for each application's configuration is easier to trace. This simplifies security audits so you can quickly identify all changes related to a specific service. Storing configs in separate repos helps isolate environments and prevents sensitive information or specific configurations from being exposed to teams that don't need them. Now that you have a strategy and understanding of the security, let's summarize. So here's the TLDR. Rather than make your app complicated, this makes your app simple and easy. For starters, easier to scale and manage. With a clear separation of concerns, it's easier to abstract your project and isolate the certain services so you can customize or experiment. Plus, scaling is much more easier to distribute the load on Argo CD components, like the application controller, repo server, API server, across different repositories. It's also an easier way to create a cleaner GitOps model by separating the application logic from the infrastructure concerns, making versioning and rollback simple and more traceable. Now, the TLDR of that TLDR, if your mono repo makes you feel like this, then you should consider the switch to a multi-repo. Now, want to know how to further supercharge your Argo CD workflow? Try using Mirantis' Cordant with Argo CD. Argo CD is available in the Cordant catalog, plus both are open source, so why not use them together? First, you can automate everything. You're automating your whole flow, from cluster creation all the way to your app delivery. Argo CD and Cordant just does all the heavy lifting for you. Second, it lets you scale effortlessly. Cordant uses composable Kubernetes native templates and automation, which simplifies the process compared to manual configuration, saving you from writing all the manifests yourself, aka what I call YAML hell. And third, it's a GitOps native fit. Cordant already uses Git for configuration, so a multi-repo Argo CD architecture fits right in. So you get a clean, consistent story from Git all the way down to the clusters. Together, Cordant and a multi-repo Argo CD architecture gives you a well-governed way to automate clusters and apps across any environment. But just don't take my word for it. See it for yourself. I'll be at the Mirantis booth 820 all throughout KubeCon giving demos, so come say hi. We'll be running demos of Cordant and Cordant AI at the top of every hour during our demo theater. And if you look up at the screen, I have a QR code with the full schedule so you wouldn't miss out. And if you watch the demo, you'll be entered into a raffle right after for a limited edition skateboard deck. Even if you're not a skater yourself, these skateboards would be the perfect holiday gift this season. But wait, one last really important thing. I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend my talk today. Let me know what you thought of today's session. Once again, my name is Anjelica Ambrosio, so feel free to connect or find me at the Mirantis booth 820 and ask me any questions. Thank you.